Hi, I'm Glenn Locke. I am currently the owner of Banjo Billy's Bus Tours. I bought it in 2015 from the guy who started it, John Georges. And before that, I worked for him since 2007. So the company's been telling ghost stories here in Boulder since 2005, and I've been doing it since 2007. Boulder, of course, was the first really nice hotel built in Boulder. It was opened on New Year's Day in 1909. And it was built because people here in Boulder decided that Boulder needed a really nice hotel. So people around town put up their money, had it built. As they were building it, there was a lot of discussion about what they were going to call it. Some people want to name it after Mackey, as a matter of fact. He had invested in it. He was a very prominent guy in town. Other people said, no, we got to call it the Boulder Hotel, so people will remember what town they were in when they stay in this great place. But there's Boulder in a lot of western states, so they took Boulder and Colorado and smushed it together. In the history of the Boulderado, there are 3 suicides. The first one, and they all occurred on the 3rd floor. The first one was in 1923. A couple from Denver, Lou and Mary Ellen Pfeiffer, came up here. They took the train here. They checked into a room on the 3rd floor of the Boulderado. After they checked in, Mary Ellen went into the bathroom to take a bath. When she comes out, there's her husband Lou lying dead on the bed. Now, some wives would have been upset by that. She wasn't, not because she killed Lou, but because, they had made a suicide pact. Lou was suffering from terminal kidney disease, and he was going broke and feeling awful all the time and knew he didn't have long to live. So he decided to end his life on his own terms. Mary Ellen couldn't live without her husband, so they made a suicide pact and came to the Boulderado to carry it out. So Mary Ellen picks up the washcloth full of chloroform that's on Lou's face, lies down next to him on the bed, puts it on her own face, and prepares to die. But there's 2 things Mary Ellen didn't know. One is that Lou had also taken a handful of sleeping pills. That's what killed him. Because the other is that chloroform's an anesthetic, and it just knocks you out. So she loses consciousness for a couple hours, but she wakes up in a little while, not dead. She's pretty upset. She doesn't want to fail in this pledge she made to her now departed husband. So she decides she better do something about this. Of course, the first thing she does is she's leaving her room. She puts a do not disturb sign on the door, and she goes down to Pearl Street to a pharmacy run by a man named George Fonda. And that building is still on the Pearl Street Mall. She asks George for a pint of chloroform. He looks at her kind of funny and says, "Lady, that's an awful lot of chloroform." He sells her 4 ounces. She brings that back, puts it in a towel, lays down again on the bed next to Lou, puts a towel on her face, and again prepares to die. And of course, the same thing happens. She wakes up a couple hours later. Now she's got a horrible headache. She's got burns on her face and her neck, but she ain't dead. And she decides, well, this just wasn't meant to be. So she checks out of the room, heads back to Denver, and goes to a hospital to have her burns looked at. That was suicide number 1 on the 3rd floor. 4th of July, 1963, a 40-year-old man from Pittsburgh checks into a room on the 3rd floor. A little while later, the staff hears a loud bang! Could just be fireworks, it's 4th of July. But they look around on the fire escape. They found the dead body of this guy, shotgun in his hand. In his room, no suicide note, just the receipt for the gun he bought that morning at McGuckin's. Four years later to the day, 4th of July, 1967, a 30-year-old man from Boulder who had just inherited $1 million And this is back when that was a lot of money, not what it costs you to go to college nowadays. He checks into a room on the 3rd floor. Again, the staff hears a loud bang! This time when they look around, they open the door to his room. There he is, lying dead on the bed, still smoking .357 Magnum in one hand, still smoking hash pipe in the other. Glass of red wine on the table next to him. No suicide notes. So 3 suicides on the 3rd floor. And the front desk at the Boulderado gets phone calls from people staying on the 3rd floor who've seen and heard all kinds of weird stuff. They hear a man walking next to the bed sometimes. They hear his footsteps. They hear him muttering to himself, but they can't make out what he's saying. I had a man on my tour one time. He had been on the tour, actually he'd been on our tour, and then he stayed on the 3rd floor of the Boulderado. And I finished, our tours start and end at the Boulderado in the bus. So as the bus pulled up, he's standing there and he's got to tell me what happened. He was in his room talking to his wife. They were the only 2 people in the room. But in the mirror, he sees a man walk behind him. Other people have seen shadows chase each other across the floor. Sometimes the vanity mirror fogs up when there's nobody in the room and no water running. The hands on several of the rooms on the 3rd floor are nice suites. They have grandfather clocks. The clock's hands start going backwards and then forwards. People have also seen an indentation in the mattress and pillow, like somebody's laying there when no one's there. Most interesting of all, though, in the corner of the lobby of the Boulderado is the original elevator from when the Boulderado opened. It's an Otis 1908. And one of those old-timey ones, you have to have a staff member run it for you if you want to use it. And sometimes when that elevator goes up and approaches the 3rd floor, a woman appears in the elevator wearing a 1920s style blue dress. And when the door opens on the 3rd floor, she steps across the threshold to get off, and she disappears again. People think that's the ghost of Mary Ellen Pfeiffer, come to look for her beloved husband, Lou. Something very creepy happened here in 1966. That thing was that a student, a young lady named Laura Jacquette, she had stayed here between her, I believe her sophomore and junior years. She was a zoology major, and she didn't want to go home for the summer. She was from Grand Junction, so she took a job as nanny for 4 boys. And one day she took the boys to a movie at the Flatirons Theater, which used to be across the street on the hill. It's now a liquor store. And she didn't want to see the movie with the kids, so she borrowed a watch from one of the kids while they were watching the movie. She was going to come over here, sit on the front steps of Mackey, have lunch, draw pictures of animals, and then go get the kids when the movie let out. But when the kids come out of the theater, she's not there to get them. And they were surprised. She'd been dependable until then, but they knew that she was coming over here to Mackey, so they came here to look for her. And on the front steps, they found her shoes, they found her sketchbook, her half-eaten lunch, even the watch they loaned her. They couldn't find Laura Jacquette. A few hours later, a music student is coming up right here in the West Tower to room 304 to practice the organ. It was an organ that was in there, and so there were only about 40 people who had keys to this room. As he's turning the key to the door, he smells smoke. When he opens the door, there on the floor is the dead body of Laura Jacquette. Whoever killed her had lit the room on fire to cover his tracks. And the only good clue left as to who had done this was one bloody handprint on the wall. Well, for 4 weeks, the Boulder police had no good suspect in this murder. So for one of the first times it was ever used in the country, they put a Crime Stopper ad in the paper, asking anybody who knows anything about this to give them a call. They get a call from a woman who lives in Longmont, who says, you know, the night that girl was killed, I washed a bunch of bloody clothes for my stepfather, Joseph Morris. And he couldn't explain why they were all bloody. Well, Joseph Morse was a custodial engineer, which is what I believe you call janitors here on the college campus. The cops picked him up, they matched his hand to the palm print, and when his case went to trial, the jury only needed 45 minutes to convict Joseph Morse. He was convicted of the murder of a lawyer, Jacques, and in 1980, as a matter of fact, at a parole hearing, he confessed to doing it. But when they asked him questions like, how'd you get her to go upstairs? And why'd you kill her? He didn't have very good answers to those questions. Because, he was so drunk that day when he came to work, he couldn't remember what he'd done. And no, he didn't get parole, by the way. He died in the state prison in 2004. Now, since his murder, strange things have gone on here in Mackey Auditorium. They took the organ out of the room where she was killed behind us. In 1977, no one wanted to go in there and play it anymore. People said the room felt creepy and weird. Some people said they saw blood dripping on the keys. So they turned it into an office, but then several times the door locked from the outside, and campus cops had to come and let people out. And people still say, in fact, we've had people on the bus tell us that they've heard some weird stuff. If you're in here at night when there's nothing going on, you might hear a woman screaming, or you might hear organ music from that organ that's been gone for over 40 years now.